We move on quickly to the session 4, which is ESG initiatives in precious metal sector. In the interest of time, I will keep the bios very short. All the bios are available in the app. ESG is no more a fad. It's key to sustainability of every business. Precious metal business is no different. We have three distinguished speakers from across the value chain to share with us the key developments in ESG in the precious metal sector. To chair the session, it's my pleasure to invite Ms. Hannah, Director, ESG Program, World Gold Council. And joining her in the session are Mr. Wang, UBS, Dr. Jonathan Jodry, Metalor Technologies, and Mr. Robin Wang, Zijin Mining Group. May I request the chair as well as all the speakers to come and take the place. Thank you. A brief introduction about our chair and the speakers. Ms. Hannah is the ESG Program Director at the World Gold Council. She works closely at the World Gold Council's 34 member companies on a variety of work streams, including responsible mining, gold's role within society, and gold and climate change. She has led the analysis of gold mining industry's socio-economic contribution to host nations across the world and the industry contribution to the UN Sustainability Development Goal. Mr. Wayne Gordon, Managing Director, Regional Chief Investment Officer, Natural Resources Analyst, and Head of APPMC, APAC Investment Content. Global Natural Resources Investment Specialist, Mining, Material, Renewable Energy, Agribusiness and Carbon, Regional Chief Investment Officer, Australia and New Zealand, UBS. Mr. Robin Wang is the Executive Chairman of Zijin Mining Group, wholly owned Singapore subsidiaries with functions as Zijin's overseas trading, financing and asset holding platform. Mr. Wang joined Zijin in 2006 and has held various increasingly important roles within the group since then, including Deputy General Manager and Head of Legal at the Zijin Overseas Operations and the Directorship of several Zijin's overseas subsidiaries. Our last speaker, Dr. Jonathan Jodry, Metalor, Business Development Director at Metalor Technologies, Tokyo. Based at Tanaka headquarters of Tokyo, Japan, Dr. Jonathan Jodry currently holds the position of Business Development Director for Metalor Technologies, a company he joined in 2009. He has previously worked as Head of Laboratories and then as Head of New Business Development in charge of leading the creation and development of new products and services. Jonathan is and has always been heavily involved in precious metals trade, non-profit and standardization association. He chairs ISO TC 174, the technical committee writing all the international standards for precious metals, jewelry and gemstones. With this introduction, with a resounding round of applause, please welcome our distinguished panelists of this session 4 on ESG. I hand over the session to Ms. Hannah. Yeah.
Good morning. Okay, great. Thanks for joining us this morning. It's my first time here, and I'm very honored to be chairing the session today. Just a little bit about the World Gold Council. I think most of you know us. We are the market development organization for the gold industry. We have 33 members at the moment, which are leading gold mining companies. And we have quite an extensive ESG program covering 4 main work streams: responsible mining, gold's role within society and the contribution that gold mining companies make, artisanal and small-scale mining, and gold and climate change. But to start off today's session, I wanted to talk a little bit about what the gold industry is doing in terms of ESG, and specifically about the Gold Industry Declaration of Responsibility and Sustainability Principles, which were launched last year. And I have a couple of slides, if you can put them up. It's a different presentation, but it's okay, don't worry. I don't need the slides. Just very briefly. I'll leave that on. Just very briefly about the declaration. I think the gold industry is doing quite a lot in terms of ESG, and the different supply chain participants are going to tell us about this. But up until last year, I think we as a gold industry hadn't come together as a group and thought about what are common goals that we can all get behind. And last year, the World Gold Council and the LBMA hosted a sustainability summit, and as part of it, the LBMA and the World Gold Council thought, is there a way that we can bring industry participants together and think about if we can all align around common goals? And 6 months later, we launched the declaration at the LBMA conference, and we had 14 associations and groups joining us and signing these principles. And what I think is great about this is that we meet now quarterly and discuss important topics within the ESG space. The signatory group is chaired by Albert Cheng, and we can discuss as a group, important issues such as the definitions of recycling gold, which I know we will talk about in a little bit, and to work more holistically as a group. And then with that, I'm going to hand over. I was going to hand over to Robin first, if his presentation can be put up, to talk a little bit about what Zijin Mining is doing within the ESG space.
Thank you, Anna. I'm very honored to have this opportunity to share Zijin Mining's ESG practice. First, let me have a brief introduction who Zijin Mining is. Zijin Mining is a China-based mining company, a global mining company. Zijin focuses on the exploration, mining, processing, refining, and sales of gold, copper, zinc, and lithium, and other mineral products. The shares of Zijin Mining is listed in Hong Kong and Shanghai Stock Exchange, and currently the market cap is exceeding $40 billion US. Zijin now currently we operate in 16 countries across Asia, Africa, Europe, Oceania, and South America. We employ about more than 48,000 employees globally. In 2022, we mined 880,000 tons of copper, 1.8 million ounces of gold, 450,000 tons of zinc, and we estimate to produce. About 120,000 lithium carbonate by 2025. So all these figures, was produced from our own mines. This does not include the production produced from our refineries. So all this together makes Zijin, the top 10 producers in terms of copper, gold, and zinc. ESG, as an important player in the international mining industry, Zijin strives to be a green, high-tech, and global mining company. And we contribute to the global economic growth and sustainable development by producing and supply high-quality and low-carbon mineral products. So, from the table, you can see that, Zijin's ESG ratings have been improved stably. So, Zijin's ESG practice covers a very broad range. I will just I just mention a few points, to just give a very general idea of what is Zijin's practice, ESG. So, in terms of corporate governance, from the table, you could see that, the ESG indicators in terms of the senior management's remuneration assessment, so the independent female directors, and also all the ESG-related proposals reviewed by the board have been improved significantly during the past few years. As for the transparency, Zijin has actually published the ESG annual report for 12 consecutive years. Yes, and also Zijin is also the first mining company in China non-ferrous industry to publish the TCFD report. For the ESG report, the content and the format of Zijin's ESG report have also been improved significantly. The ESG data, philosophy, and policies have been disclosed in more details. Now the ESG report focuses more on human rights, environmental change, mine closure, and ESG risk analysis. As for the action program on climate change, Zijin has carried out significant systematic works in addressing climate change, such as the carbon footprint verification program, the construction of carbon neutral experiment bases, etc. So our overall target on the climate change is by 2029 to achieve carbon peak, and by 2050 to achieve carbon neutral. So as for the labor, Zijin always have an absolute commitment on the high safety and health standards. Zijin has offered globally 48,000 jobs globally, and 94% of this employment of employees are employed locally, and 15% of the employees are female employees. And 97% of these, our security guys have received, human rights protection trainings, and 0 human rights violation was detected during last year. Another important thing is about the community. As a mining company, we have focused very much on the community development. Zijin's community engagement philosophy is respect, transparency, accountability, and mutual development. Zijin actively promote community development projects, in 6 major areas, say employment, skills and education, infrastructure development, health and wellness, economic project development, and business sustainable business opportunities. So in 2020, Zijin's spending on the community economic development projects exceeding $65 million. That's pretty much. Thanks.
Thank you, Robin. I think maybe in the interest of time, I'm going to hand over straight to Jonathan to give his presentation.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. And in the interest of time also, I will fly a little bit through this presentation. I think it's more interesting to discuss after that. So, okay. Metalor Technologies, I'm sure most of you know, we are one of the largest gold refiner. We are working on 3 continents, 5 good delivery refineries, and 1 in Singapore. If you have any question about Metalor, I direct you to KLAP, the country manager here. I will talk today about 3 things. ESG initiatives in sourcing, mostly what we call responsible sourcing in refining, decarbonization, and in the products, and mostly on transparency and traceability. So for responsible sourcing, Metalor Technologies has very clear rules. We do not source from mine collectors. We stopped a couple of years ago. We do not source from ASM, except some very specific programs like Swiss Better Gold. And I know this is a hot topic in the industry. We can discuss later why we took this decision. And also we have defined a large number of areas around the world that we deem to be not compliant with our policies, and we simply don't work at all in those areas. But that's not enough. So a couple of years ago, we made quite a lot of academic research. We worked with the Swiss universities, and we developed what we call the Geoforensic Passport. This is a project that lasted 6 years and was co-funded by Metalor Technologies and the Swiss government. And eventually the outcome of the project was that we were able to identify a way to assign a signature to every mine supplier that we have. And for every single doré bar that we receive at Metalor, we sample, we do a quick analysis that we developed in-house, and we automatically, as you can see on the bottom of the slide, we automatically have our system which is going to validate if the bar is coming from the announced origin. This works really, really well, and it has been on full operations for more than 3 years now, and it allows us with an extremely high level of certainty to ensure that we don't have any manipulation of the material until it arrives at our refinery. Now that we felt we solved the problem related to mines, we are discussing the problem with recycling. And as you heard already, one of the big issues is that everyone has a different definition of what recycled gold is. We mostly work with RGC COC standard. This is a request of our customers. But at the same time, we recognize that the market is highly fragmented. So it was mentioned yesterday, there is a big ISO project right now to create a neutral, internationally recognized definition of recycled gold. And really, one of the key points is to try to limit what we see a lot on recycled gold, which is greenwashing. So there is a lot of abuse of the term recycled gold, and we try to come up with a definition that is acceptable for everyone. This is a project that normally will be launched in 2 weeks, and we hope to have an outcome over the next 18 months. At the refining site, we have one major problem. As I can do whatever I want, the melting point of gold will still be at 1064 degrees, and I cannot change that. And the problem is to reach to that temperature, you need energy, you need a lot of it, and you need to melt material several times in the course of evaluation, refining, and product manufacturing. So the reality is that being carbon neutral as a refiner, if you don't buy certificates, it's simply never going to be possible. So we have absolutely to limit as much as possible our carbon footprint. And at Metalor, we started 4 years ago a very strict program to limit our energy consumptions. We are investing now $13 million to equip most of our sites with solar panel. And again, we won't be able to melt all the gold and precious metals with solar panel, but at least this allows us to limit as much as possible the consumption. The problem is, of course, Scope 3, and I probably will talk about that a little bit later. Refiners, at the same time, they are in a unique position to use, develop, and invest in technologies which may really change the way we consume or create energy in the next decades. And as you know, Metalor Technologies is part of the Tanaka Kikinzoku group in Japan, and they are one of the key leaders of fuel cell development. And this, sometimes we focus a lot on how much refiners are emitting CO2, and it is a high number, but we forget also that refiners can really help putting in place new technologies that globally will have a positive impact on the future carbon neutral society. For the products, Metalor has as a rule that all our products, we consider they are ESG, they meet all the requirements, and they are far above. We don't create ESG plus and ESG minus products. We don't want to create some extra branding. This is part of what we call the greenwashing. We are able to provide to the customers whatever they want. If they want a single mine, if they want single refining, if they want traceability from specific areas or type of material that is feasible, provided they are ready to pay for that. And at the same time, we offer full transparency on the market to our customers through a couple of tools. Security with the Billion Protect security feature that was developed by a Swiss company that is a leader on security inks. And also an app that allows all users to scan a kilobar and get immediately information on when it was produced, how it was produced, and if it's a single mine refining gold or a specific origin, where the gold is coming from. And this is available at no cost, neither for the app nor for the scanning, because we believe that this is, first of all, a brand protection, and we want to protect our products. Okay, and one final slide to show everything, and that's all for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Much appreciated. Thank you, Hannah, and my other panelists. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to be here. I think if I press this thing, something good happens, right? Okay, let's go. All right. So I suppose I want to start off by saying that the UBS relationship with both these companies, the World Gold Council and other organisations, is incredibly important because we rely on certification, we rely on transparency, and we rely on good delivery to be able to achieve the outcomes that our clients want to achieve. We have a dilemma in gold, and that is demand is high, but at the same time, demand for better outcomes for the industry and traceability as well as transparency is rising. And particularly from a regulatory side, the burden of this is also increasing. Now, in UBS, we recommend clients hold gold in the context of a portfolio over the long term. We have clients who have gold in our vault in Zurich through multiple generations, some many decades, if not century-old holdings. And what we're seeing is that from a portfolio perspective in these more challenging times of investment, that gold demand is actually increasing pretty materially. You can see here in the slides that gold has an ability to actually outperform many other asset classes, and investors increasingly are looking at these options to support their portfolios. We are quite positive on gold prices. You can see here that we actually expect gold demand will continue to increase, and that is going to continue to put upward pressure on prices. We actually think that we'll see new records in gold over the next 12 months. Now, this is really important from a demand side because the clients that we work with, including the official sector, as well as some of the world's largest family offices, all tell us that they are increasing their demand for gold. And on the right-hand side, or the left-hand side as it is for you, you can see here that while the increase in allocation goes from 1% to 2%, this is pretty material in a sector like gold. And you can see here that the interest of global family offices, particularly around 28%, are looking to add more to gold over the next 12 months. Central banks, very clear, and of course central banks as well are a key demand for some of the more provenance products and strategies that we have to offer. What's our commitment to sustainability? So as a bank, we have made a number of commitments to ESG frameworks as well as the Sustainable Development Goals. We take these incredibly seriously, and in that context, as we add gold into various portfolios, we have to have assurance that the gold we are adding has taken into account both scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions, as well as has provenance or looks at welfare and societal challenges. Now that leaves us with sometimes a contradiction. And that's what we're going to talk about today, and I won't try to preempt the difficult questions that Hannah is going to pose, which she always does when I do panels with her, and stretches even my imagination of some things. But the point is that we're aware of the contradiction, demand for an ESG focus in at least the investment of gold, and many of the challenges on the right-hand side, my colleagues from Zijin mining and in the refining space are well aware of. When we think about the impact of gold production, when I was pulling this data together, it actually surprised me, and I was talking to Hannah about this, it surprised me that gold actually has, compared to many other commodities, has a relatively small impact overall from an emissions perspective. That doesn't negate the emissions that we create when mining gold, but certainly it's not quite as challenging as things like copper when it comes to things like scope 3 emissions, which are far more difficult. But nonetheless, clearly the direct emissions is something that we have with respect to engagement, and then on scope 2 emissions and then to scope 3 emissions, we look to trying to not just abate carbon emissions, but also look at carbon offsetting as a result. And in fact, in our collaboration with a number of banks on a global basis, we've started up our own carbon trading market to be able to do this in a more effective and efficient way. Clearly, there are a number of approaches to sustainable gold that are available on the market. The key issue we have in most of these approaches, and it often depends on the type of client, but from a broader product suite, the key issue we have is liquidity in many of these things. A lot of these approaches have pretty small amounts that are available on a weekly and a monthly basis. And if you're running an ETF, for example, that makes it very, very challenging. And again, we rely on our partners alongside the refiners and so forth to make this gold available from a liquidity standpoint to be able to offer these products. And I'll leave it there. And I'll pass over to Hannah for the, as I said, tough, difficult questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I'll try my tough questions. That's all right. Look, I was going to start with some of the questions that we get asked a lot at the World Gold Council. And I think the question we get asked the most is around provenance, and it's something that you mentioned. I know, Jonathan, you mentioned it as well. And specifically around how can investors and other stakeholders, how do they know that the gold they buy has been ethically sourced? And especially with so many products on the market now that differentiate that. So Wayne, I'm going to ask you first, what do you think investors care the most about?
Okay, so from our perspective, it's twofold. The first thing is around welfare, particularly of the local communities that often surround these mines and are trying to achieve some benefits from the activity. The second thing is around climate change. And particular, the challenging thing now is as we move down towards scope 2 and 3 emissions, and not just from a client perspective, or from a bank perspective, having to make sure that the products we offer and that we promote have taken account of those and accurately reflect what emissions are actually being produced in the mining process, refining process, and so forth. So while the carbon or fully offset gold that we sell is still a very small proportion of our total traded amount. It is a proportion that is growing very, very quickly. And so a lot of these challenges we're having to confront pretty much head on now. And in many ways, we're actually reliant on our colleagues in the refining sector and in the mining sector to be able to assist us in making sure that there's that transparency along the supply chain. Yeah.
Yes, I was actually going to pass to a miner first. From a mining perspective, when you mention communities, welfare, greenhouse gas emissions, what is Zijin doing? I know you're reporting on the responsible gold mining principles, which are 51 principles that look at the ESG. Is this something that investors are asking you about or other stakeholders? And how do you report on what you're doing at mine site level?
Thank you, Anna. I think responsible mining principles, sets out, very sustainable reporting framework, in addressing the key ESG indicators as to how to constitute responsible mining companies. Responsible gold mining. As a mining company, I think implementing this kind of RGMPs would benefit a mining company in lots of ways. Firstly, this meeting this RGMP requirement would require a mining company to demonstrate very high standards of ESG performance And this will require this mining company to improve its systems, process, controls, in relation to the ESG factors in a very full or broad range. And also, implementing these RGMPs also require a mining company to evidence a greater level of transparency and accountability, and also require this mining company to operate responsibly with very strict ESG protocols and practice. And all this together would, in return, will make this mining company more recognized and more credible and more attractive to investors, customers, and all other stakeholders. For the reporting, typical for our mining companies, for Zijin Mining, we for our ESG reports, we normally focus more on the environmental protection, the human rights protection, and the communities, labors, especially more on communities, because different stakeholders have different expectations from this kind of, from this, reporting. That we, I think, we focus more on community requirement and also the labor safety. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to hand over to you, Jonathan. And what are refiners doing? You said in your presentation that you are very aware of greenwashing claims on products, but that there is, you have the capabilities of producing single mine origin gold or ASM or whatever it may be. What are customers asking you for? And maybe as a follow-up question as well around the definition of recycling, I think a lot of investors are looking at recycling gold especially from a carbon point of view, as maybe the better option. But why is it so challenging to agree one definition of what recycling gold is?
So the first thing, I think it's very important that everyone understands that there is no one gaining from trying to oppose recycled gold and mined gold. We hear a lot lately. People more in the mining sector say that recycling gold, we don't know where gold is coming from, and people recycling gold said, yeah, but the mines is generating too much CO2, and both statements are kind of true. I think that the gold is different, and it has advantages and inconvenience, and each customer, they have to decide what is best for their products. So we see, for example, in the watch industry, there is a strong shift toward recycled gold. They really want recycled gold. At the same time, you have smaller brands, they will say, no, I won't really mine gold, but from a single mine, and I want to have more information on how the gold is being mined and what is done for the local communities. And I think both approaches are completely reasonable. The reality is all recycled gold has been mined at some point. And in fact, it's very difficult to know if it was mined 2 weeks ago or 2 centuries ago. So that's why when you put all of this together, I think it's important to give to the customer the transparency you can, and then you let the customer decide. Regarding the recycling, and this is a little bit a problem because we kind of say everything that is not mined is recycled, and this definition is causing issues. Today, there is different players on the market, and they all propose different definitions. At the end, what is happening is that the customers, they fix their own definition for recycled gold. So I mentioned Metalor is using a lot RGC COC gold, but suddenly we have customers saying, oh, I want RGC COC gold, but I don't want dental scraps, or I don't want gold coming from Africa. And it creates literally for every customer you have different requirements, and it's really complicated to handle. It creates a lot of difficulties for refining, and at the end you also increase the carbon footprint simply because you segregate all refinings when there's no really added value to do that. So that's why a definition that is acceptable for everyone and that could be used by the end consumers is something very important.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, you just mentioned carbon footprint. Maybe I can ask a question to all of you. I think there is a real shift away from the kind of 2050 net zero targets, because it is so far away still, right? And we've seen a real shift of investors, but also other stakeholders asking, what about the next 5 years? What about the next 10 years? What can companies do? What can the industry do to decarbonize? Maybe Robin, I'll ask you first. I know you showed your targets, but what is your goal for the next 5 to 10 years? And are you being asked that by your stakeholders?
Thank you, Anna. So as for, as shown in my presentation, we have a very clear climate, timeline for how to address the climate changes. The overall target is by 2029, we achieve carbon peak. And by 2050 to achieve carbon neutral. By 2025, that is next. We have a 3 years rolling plan. We have to achieve the carbon, green gas emission per unit of industrial value added value by 20%. I think the long-term, short-term goal. We have a very specific measures. How to achieve this. It's very pretty much technical. I'm not very good at explaining this. But if anyone who are very interested, we can have a further discussion, and also can refer to our annual ESG report. It have a very clear working parts and timeline to achieve this short-term goal and long-term goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. I know you showed some technology in your slides. What is your focus?
I think the first focus is to be more efficient at every level. I mean, the reason I'm wearing a jacket is because I was freezing the last 2 days in the corridor. So this is the kind of, I know it's kind of a joke, but there is a lot of energy that is used and that is wasted. I think we can already achieve a lot by really becoming efficient in the way we use our energies. Then, of course, it's just the beginning. And I mentioned the solar panel. I think that's really something that can be easily put in place, switching to green electricity. So there are a couple of steps that are pretty easy to do. And honestly, they are not that expensive. So you have a return on investments that are long, but they are economically, they can be justified, even if you base yourself only on economic reason. Then for the next step, it's clearly a change in technologies, because otherwise we will not go to where we are supposed to go.
Thank you. Do you want to respond to
that?
Yeah,
let me say a couple of things about this. So firstly, when I think about, particularly on the carbon offsetting side, there's two roads we can go. We can go down the road of abatement, we can go down the road of offsetting. Clearly our preference is on the abatement side. How do we achieve this? Well, we achieve it through the voluntary carbon market in particular, where we believe that there's a level of offsetting which actually requires actions to be done. And those actions, often through revegetation and other things, also the repair of a mine site once the mine has run its useful life. These sort of elements are very key for us. When we're looking at companies to invest in, often it's a little bit of a conflict in the context of you have the benefits of sort of artisanal mining and so forth, right? But at the same time, the bigger companies have greater economies of scale to adopt the newest technology to reduce emissions overall at the mine production side. Clearly, the abatement side is very difficult in many segments of the sector. We will not be able to abate some areas of the mining process or in the supply chain. That's going to be almost impossible. And so in that context, we rely on that offsetting to be able to at least abate the last mile, I guess, as you would say. For us in the short term, clearly we're still waiting for technology to catch up. Yet we have this demand that I talked about, which is very, very robust right now. So the focus for us is on the offsetting side, because it does provide some beneficial outcomes in the very short term, but from a medium-term perspective, we would like to think that we could achieve some sort of benchmarks in technology to reduce emissions. I think it's interesting that, for example, Rio Tinto the other day announced that they were able to achieve zero emissions across their mining fleet, or at least they'll very soon achieve that. And there are many other companies as well that are able to do this. And so the activity is there, but we have a lot of catch up to do, and that's where we see the offsetting plays that role. Yeah.
Okay, are there any questions from the floor before I continue asking questions?
Hello, good morning. Thank you very much to the panelists for sharing. Right, I'm wondering if there is any ESG done on the post-mining part of it. And if there is, would you like to share your expertise? Thank you.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
Any ESG activity for post-mining operations? Am I right, sir?
Yes.
I think this should be rather a question for you. I wouldn't really know how to answer that in a really... I don't have that information on that subject, to be honest.
Okay, any other questions from anyone? Okay, let me ask my last question in the interest of time. To all of you, the same question. What do you think are the biggest challenges, but also the biggest opportunities for your business when it comes to ESG, and maybe for the gold industry as a whole, if you have any thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, let me start, because I noticed you handed it to me. I guess from our perspective, I brought it up in my short presentation, but liquidity is a significant issue for us, particularly when we're looking at things like provenance gold and so forth, being able to get those levels of trading activity that enable us to participate and at the same time have the impact that we intend. From a business ourselves, we have gone on a path to promote fully sustainable portfolios. In fact, when you look at our broader mandates that we promote now across all sections, the preferred mandate is actually the sustainable mandate, and at the same time for precious metals and for gold in particular to continue to have a place in portfolios, we need to get the transparency and give the confidence to the client that what's on the label actually is what they end up with. And so I think liquidity and transparency is something that the industry is working on. I know the World Gold Council is also with their partners working on this, and that's incredibly important for us to continue to participate, yeah, alongside of our friends at the refiners and the miners.
I think gold mining will continue because the gold value will go up, so there's absolutely no reason why gold mining would stop. So the first thing is really to try to promote also, everyone in the chain should promote the change from the mines to the refineries and to the end consumer. And this is usually done better not by regulation, but when there is a market demand and when also people are ready to pay a premium for specific qualities. Right now there is very little or almost no premium for gold that has specific features. And I think if you want really to move in that direction, if you want to be able to develop more responsible mining, mining that will produce less CO2, if you want to limit the footprint at the refineries, you need to be able to develop products, and this has to be financed somehow by the terminal market. So I think that is one of the immediate way where we can see some changes. On the long term, I'm mentioning I'm a scientist, as you know, so for me it's really the precious metals. We should not forget that they are not only precious because they are rare, they're also precious because they have unique properties. And there is, we talk a lot about the fact that vehicle will work without platinum and without palladium in the near future, and everyone is a bit afraid for the PGM on the investment side. But on the other way, there is probably a lot of opportunities for those metals to be used in applications that we are developing now, and also in other applications that we have probably not found yet. And I really think there will be a major technology shift before 2050, because in my opinion, it's the only way to have a fully neutral carbon.
Thanks. Less than 1 minute left for me. So I think for a mining company, the immediate challenge is the safety. The safety issues always pose a very immediate harm to our workforce for the labor working for the workers who working in the mine. So I think for anyone who working on the mine site, they always focus on the policies, the standards, how a mining company regulate their safety issues. So as a mining companies, the safety and occupational health, the standards should always be, the first priority for all mining companies. Thanks. Oh, right time.
Yeah, we're right on time. Thank you so much to my panel. I think it was a really interesting discussion. I'm sure if we were to sit here next year, a lot would have moved on, and there might be very different answers than we have this year. It's such an evolving space. So thank you so much for your insights, and I hope we can continue this conversation.
Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause once again. For the first time, we have a lady as the session chair, and that too for a very important subject, which is ESG. And earlier yesterday, we had Ms. Shakila chairing another important session on GBI. And special thanks to World Gold Council for putting up this session in such a wonderful manner, because we had 3 different experts from across the supply chain, so that we had the mining perspective, the refining perspective, and the end user perspective as well. Thank you so much, Ms. Hannah, Mr. Wayne Garden, Dr. Jonathan Jodry, and Mr. Robin Wang. Thank you. Thank you very much.